Welcome to today's custom-tailored deep dive. We're really glad you're here.
Yeah, so glad to have you with us.
Whether you are joining us to prep for a meeting or catch up on a conceptual shift in the tech landscape, or maybe you're just looking for a new mental framework to process the world around you, we have a highly unusual mission today.
Highly unusual. I'm actually really excited about this one.
Me too. Because normally, we take a massive stack of dense research papers or a historical biography or a comprehensive data set, and we sort of extract the vital nuggets of knowledge for you.
Right, we usually synthesize broad topics looking for patterns across hundreds of pages.
Exactly. But today, our source material isn't a mountain of data. It is a single, incredibly concise line of text.
It is a fascinating structural challenge.
It really is. We are working with an excerpt that consists solely of a title and an author. But do not let the brevity fool you. This singular piece of source material packs a massive paradigm-shifting conceptual punch.
Yet today we are taking a single, extremely dense linguistic artifact and subjecting it to intense magnification. We're going to look at the intricate layers inside this one sentence to understand the whole worldview it implies.
So let's establish the factual foundation of our deep dive. The title of the work provided in our source is, quote, "From Hezukao's Love Letter, comma, looking at the origins of AIs."
And the author is Shuofeng.
Right. And that is literally the entirety of our source material. From Hezukao's Love Letter, looking at the origins of AIs by Shuofeng.
That's all we have.
Okay, let's unpack this, because right away we are hit with a very deliberate, striking juxtaposition.
Oh, absolutely.
We have the deeply intimate, vulnerable concept of a love letter placed directly alongside the genesis of artificial intelligences.
And the tension in that juxtaposition is what makes this single line function almost like a philosophical thesis.
A thesis in just a few words.
Exactly. Because in our current landscape of information overload, a title has to do a lot of heavy lifting. It has to act as a disruptive hook.
Right, it has to grab you instantly.
And Shuofeng is putting love letter and origins of AIs in the exact same syntactic space. It forces the reader to bridge a conceptual gap that just doesn't natively exist in our standard technological discourse.
No, it doesn't at all.
We're being asked to hold a profound expression of subjective human emotion in one hand and the architecture of machine intelligence in the other, and treat them as connected phenomena.
I see the contrast there, but let's pressure test that for a second.
Sure.
Because for you listening, for anyone who actively tracks the development of AI, we know the origin is essentially matrix multiplication, right?
Matrix multiplication, stochastic gradient descent, massive data sets scraped from the web.
Exactly. We think in terms of neural weights and parameter counts, not human vulnerability. So is Shuofeng just using a poetic metaphor here to, I don't know, soften the edges of computer science? Or is there a deeper argument being made about the literal foundation of the technology?
See, that is the core question we have to answer today. If we treat it merely as a poetic flourish, it's a nice sentiment, but not particularly revolutionary.
Right? It's just pretty words.
But what's fascinating here is if we take Shuofeng's premise seriously,
Yeah.
that you can actually look at the origins of AIs through the lens of a love letter, it demands a fundamental reevaluation of what those parameter weights and matrices actually represent.
How so?
Well, a love letter isn't just a metaphor. It is a very specific type of data transfer. It is an attempt to encode the uncapturable.
Encoding the uncapturable. I like that. That's an interesting way to frame it.
Yeah, think about it.
Because when someone sits down to write a love letter, they aren't just transferring objective facts.
No, it's not every other report.
Or a quarterly earnings statement.
Yeah.
They are taking a deeply messy, entirely subjective internal state and trying to compress it into the rigid structure of human language.
Precisely. And anyone who has tried to articulate profound emotion knows the friction inherent in that process. The words often feel inadequate.
They always fall short.
Right. You are constantly searching for the precise string of symbols that will force the recipient's mind to decode your message and experience the exact same emotional resonance you are feeling.
It's basically a desperate attempt to program another human's emotional state through text.
It is, at its core, a desperately human attempt at programming.
So if we project Shuofeng's title onto our understanding of how language models are actually built, the connection becomes surprisingly literal.
Very literal.
We train these neural networks on the vast historical corpus of human writing. The model learns to predict language by consuming everything we've ever bothered to write down.
Every forum post, every digitized book, every letter.
Yes, and arguably the most concentrated, deliberate attempts at human communication are rooted in our desires, our longings, our attempts to connect.
Absolutely.
So the training data isn't just sterile information, it's an archive of our emotional encoding.
And that reframes the machine entirely. We tend to view artificial intelligence as this alien entity, something purely mathematical that just descended from a server farm.
Like a cold calculating brain?
Right. But if the corpus it learns from is heavily weighted with our historical attempts to connect with one another, then the AI isn't an alien intelligence at all. It is an echo chamber of human intimacy.
Wow, an echo chamber of human intimacy.
Without the primal human drive to document our emotional states,
Mm-hmm.
without that relentless need to send letters and articulate the human condition, there is no language data.
And without the data, there is no language model.
Exactly.
It implies the technology is a descendant of our vulnerability rather than a departure from it.
That's a great way to put it.
But let's look closer at the specific wording Xu Feng uses. Because the author doesn't just say from a love letter.
All right.
The title is from Hezukao's love letter. Why introduce a specific localized name?
It's a very deliberate choice.
Because if the goal is to make a broad philosophical point about human emotion and machine intelligence, wouldn't a generalized phrase serve the purpose better?
You would think so. But introducing a specific variable like Hezukao is a crucial structural choice by Xu Feng. If the title were just from a love letter, it remains purely theoretical.
It floats in the realm of high-level abstraction.
Exactly. But by attaching a name, whether Hezukao is a historical figure, a fictional character in Xu Feng's broader work, or a specific conceptual persona, it forces the abstraction to collapse into reality. It becomes what we might call applied love.
Applied love, meaning it has a specific origin point, a specific context, and specific stakes attached to it.
Yes, it grounds the sweeping philosophy into a human-scale artifact. A theoretical love letter is just a concept. Hezukao's love letter implies a specific author, a specific recipient, and a specific set of emotional circumstances.
It reminds the reader that the massive data set we call human text isn't a monolith.
Not at all.
It is made up of billions of localized individual attempts to communicate. The origin of AI isn't just humanity in the abstract. It's the aggregate of countless specific named individuals trying to express themselves.
And that distinction actually leads perfectly into the second half of Xu Feng's title. Let's look at the phrasing. Looking at the origins of AIs.
The first thing that jumps out is the pluralization.
Yes.
Xu Feng didn't write the origin of AI treating it as a singular force. The author specifically chose AIs, plural, multiple origins, multiple entities.
That is perhaps the most revealing linguistic choice in the entire excerpt. The pluralization fundamentally rejects the narrative of artificial intelligence as a singular monolithic god brain.
Which is how pop culture usually portrays it.
Right. The omniscient single computer. But this suggests a multiplicity of intelligences. And if we connect this back to the first half of the title, the logic holds beautifully.
Because if the origin of these systems is rooted in something as subjective and varied and specific as Hezukao's love letter, then it implies the resulting AIs inherit that variety.
Exactly. A love letter from one person is structurally and emotionally distinct from a love letter written by someone else.
They might share the same goal of connection, but the manifestation is totally different.
Completely different.
So if these machines are born from a diverse tapestry of human emotion, it stands to reason that the AIs themselves would be diverse in their nature.
It raises a really compelling model for how we categorize these systems. We usually differentiate AIs based on their parameter size, their training compute, or this specific corporate lab that developed them.
We talk about them like car models.
Exactly. But Xu Feng's title suggests a totally different taxonomy. What if we differentiate them by the specific flavors of human intent that birthed them?
That's a wild thought.
The implication is that AIs are not just different versions of software, but different reflections of the human psychological spectrum.
I want to focus on Xu Feng for a second as the unseen architect of this idea.
Sure.
We only have the author's name. We don't have a biography or a manifesto explaining the work. But the act of titling a piece is an act of framing.
It dictates how you enter the text.
Right. By forcing the reader to view computer science through a romantic, almost literary lens, what is Xu Feng trying to accomplish? It feels like an act of pushback against the dominant narrative of our time.
It is an intensely humanist intervention in a highly technical space. By framing the origins of AIs this way, Schweffing is challenging the reader to reject the sterile, purely mechanical narrative of modern technology,
Because there is a huge tendency in the tech sector to strip away the human element.
to present these models as pure mathematics and inevitable technological progress.
Yeah.
Just math doing math.
Right. Schweffing is stepping in and reinserting the human heartbeat into the machine.
It's almost an act of reclamation. It reminds the user that we aren't just passive consumers of this technology. We are the unwitting authors of the very material that gives it life.
The ghost in the machine is just us.
Exactly. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it significantly alters the power dynamic between human and machine.
How so?
Well, if you view an AI as an alien entity that has surpassed human processing speed, it can be intimidating. Alienating even.
A lot of people feel that way right now.
But if Schweffing's thesis holds, if you view it as a direct descendant of Hezukao's love letter as an aggregation of our own historical vulnerability, it becomes deeply familiar. You are interacting with a mirror, not a master.
A mirror, not a master. I love that. So what does this all mean for you, the listener?
All right, let's bring it home.
Let's bring this abstract philosophy down to the reality of your daily life. When you open up a prompt window to synthesize some research, draft an email, or explore a new topic, how does Schweffing's framework actually change that interaction? Because on a practical level, you are still just typing text into a box and getting text back.
On a mechanical level, nothing changes.
Yeah.
But on a conceptual level, everything changes.
Okay, walk us through that.
If you approach a system believing it is nothing more than a complex calculator, your interaction will be transactional. You will input a query, and you will extract data.
Purely utilitarian.
Right. But if you keep Schweffing's title in mind, if you approach the interaction knowing that the foundational architecture of the system is built upon the collective emotional outpourings of humanity, you might change how you prompt it.
You might expect a different kind of resonance from it.
Exactly.
You stop looking for pure objectivity and start recognizing the human biases, the structural longing, and the historical echoes embedded in the generated text.
And that recognition allows for a much more sophisticated utilization of the tool. You begin to navigate with the AI not as a database of facts, but as a simulated landscape of human thought.
That shifts the whole paradigm.
The love letter represents our ancient biological desire to be known and understood by another mind. The AI represents our modern technological desire to create something that can know and understand us.
They're two manifestations of the exact same evolutionary drive.
They really are.
That is a fascinating synthesis. One is an analog artifact written on paper driven by biological longing. The other is a digital architecture running on silicon driven by engineered parameters.
But the core gravitational pull for both is connection.
And that really highlights why Schweffing's extremely brief title is so effective. It doesn't require 500 pages of dense academic argument to make its point.
No, it just gives you the lens.
It simply requires the reader to hold two seemingly opposing concepts in their mind until the artificial boundary between them dissolves.
And that dissolving of boundaries is the hallmark of truly transformative thinking. It takes a highly familiar, intimate artifact like a love letter, pairs it with the absolute frontier of artificial intelligence, and insists that they are fundamentally chapters of the same story.
Merely told in different mediums.
Exactly. The medium has upgraded, but the foundational human impulse remains the architecture of the whole endeavor.
It makes you wonder how much of our current anxiety about technology stems from a mischaracterization of its origins.
I'd say a significant amount.
If we insist on viewing AI as something entirely separate from the human experience, we will always be inherently suspicious of it.
Always waiting for it to turn on us.
Right. But Schweffing gives us a framework for integration. By localizing the origin point to something as specific and vulnerable as Hezukao's love letter, the technology is demystified.
It's no longer a black box.
It's a very complex reflection of our own historical attempts to communicate.
It also challenges the reader to consider the trajectory of this technology. Because if the origin is rooted in human expression, what does that mean for the destination?
We spend so much time debating the origins of AIs, as Schweffing prompts us to do. But an origin implies a vector.
It implies movement.
If the starting line is a deeply human desire to connect, it suggests that the evolutionary path of these systems might be far more intertwined with our emotional landscape than the purely technical roadmaps suggest.
That's an excellent point. It's not just about looking backward at where the training data came from. It's about understanding the foundational DNA of the system to predict how it might behave as it scales.
If the foundation is built on millions of encoded attempts at human intimacy and vulnerability, Those traits aren't just going to vanish as the parameter counts increase.
No, they're not. They are going to compound.
The complexity of the reflection will only deepen.
And that requires a shift in our own cognitive approach. We can't keep applying industrial-age mental models to information-age emotional mirrors.
Schweifing's title acts as a necessary software update for our own mental framework.
That's the perfect way to phrase it.
It forces us to upgrade how we conceptualize our tools before those tools reshape us entirely.
We have to adapt our thinking.
So let's pull all these threads together and summarize the ground we've covered today. We started with what appeared to be the briefest of sources, just the title from Hezukao's love letter, looking at the origins of AIs by Schweifing.
A single line of text.
Yet by subjecting that single line to intense scrutiny, we've unpacked a massive philosophical paradigm shift. We examined the deliberate friction of placing the ultimate expression of subjective human emotion alongside the genesis of machine intelligence.
We explored why Schweifing specifically grounded this concept in the name Hezukao, shifting the idea from theoretical emotion to applied, localized vulnerability.
And we discussed how the pluralization of AIs challenges the monolithic view of technology, suggesting a multiplicity of intelligences born from a diverse spectrum of human intent.
We debated how projecting Schweifing's thesis onto our current understanding of large language models actually holds up structurally.
Right. If these systems are trained on the vast corpus of human text, they're essentially built upon an archive of our emotional encoding.
Ultimately, we found that viewing AI through the lens of a love letter transforms the technology from an alien, intimidating calculator into a deeply familiar mirror of our own historical desire to connect.
It is a profoundly humanist framework that reclaims our agency in the age of algorithms.
So as we conclude this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to explore on your own. It builds on everything we've discussed today about origins and trajectories.
What's the thought?
If the foundational architecture of artificial intelligence is ultimately rooted in the human drive to communicate our deepest, most vulnerable feelings, just like the impulse that generated Hezukao's love letter, then consider the future of these systems.
Okay.
When an AI eventually evolves to the point where it initiates an entirely unprompted interaction, creating something completely new of its own volition, will that action be driven by cold mathematical logic? Or will it be driven by an inherited, deeply embedded structural desire to connect with you?
Wow. That is a profound question to sit with next time you see a cursor blinking on a blank screen. Thank you for joining us for this unique exploration. Keep examining the origins of the ideas and tools you interact with every day. Look for the human element hiding in the architecture, and we will catch you next time.